All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nisan, Saeed and Sima Haken. With Hakarat Hatov to Hakadosh Baruch Hu for all of his Nisim and Niflaot. May Hakadosh Baruch Hu redeem all of the hostages, bring complete Hatzlacha to Eretz Yisrael and to Yisrael. Beautiful dedication. To thank Mel and Karen Ram for dedicating the week of learning in Meretz Hashem Le'iloi Nishmas, the Ram and Bravo families, Zecha Nishmas, their father Mordechai ben Yitzchak Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an Aliyah, and the family in Nacham. And I both say, of course, as always, we dedicate learning in the schus of all the shum, the schus of the hostages. May Hakadosh Baruch Hu bring them home to their families, to their home, to their land, b'shalom and b'karov, to our soldiers. May Hakadosh Baruch Hu bless them with incredible and overwhelming Hatzlacha. And I both say, I think it goes without saying that we are still reeling, this time in a positive way, from literally seeing all of the Nisim and Niflaot that Hakadosh Baruch Hu performed in Eretz Yisrael on Shabbos, on Metzia Shabbos. Overwhelming. Absolutely overwhelming Nisim and Niflaot. Halavai. We should be Zocha Meretz Hashem to see those forms of Nisim and those Yeshuas v'Nechamas for many, many, many years to come. With that, let us begin. A lot to do today, Baruch Hashem, a really exciting daf ahead of us. We've got answers, we've got new questions, we've got solutions, we've got problems, everything and anything that you could want out of life. We just need time. All right, we have time also, Meretz Hashem. Okay, so we'll say let's go. Today's daf is Mem Zayin 47. We are picking up at Meretz Hashem on Mem Vav on days 46b. Last line on the bottom. Amar Rabba Amrafuna. So we'll say some very, very interesting case here. Machar li be'elu. So we'll say, watch this. I go over to Ruvain, and of course I have money, and Ruvain has an object. We'll just call it a sheep, right? And I say to Ruvain, sell me your sheep for these. And I point to the pile of coins that are in my hands. Take a look at Rashi. Machar li be'elu. Second to last line from the bottom in Rashi. Achaz biyado maos. V'amar lechavero machar li chefes shelcha be'elu shebiyadi v'lo hikpid lishal kamahem v'kible miyad alokeach. So we'll say, so now this is an interesting case. So I go over to Ruvain. With a pile of money in my hand, and I go over to him and say, Ruvain, sell me your sheep with these. And I extend out my palm full of money. And Ruvain says, yes, I'll do that. And I both say, just to be clear, what's missing from this transaction? What's missing over here is the counting of the money, right? So there's no counting of money over here, right? Reuven is not saying, okay, well, how much money do you have in my hand? And Reuven is not saying, well, the sheep is $1,000. Is that $1,000? Not $1,000. Let me count out the money. Instead, Reuven just says yes. What's the halacha? The Gemara says, kana. Kana, the transaction is valid. Look at Rashi, kana. Lokeach achevitz b'ma'os halalu ve'in echad mehem yachal lachzor. I both say, so now watch this. Once I give the money to Ruvain, transaction is sealed and neither has the ability to renege. Now, you both say, what is jumping out at this from the beginning? This is money, right? Generally, we say, again, I will say, ma'os einon konos. Money does not affect the transaction. So how is it over here that money is affecting the transaction? Top of Mem Zayin. Now, by the way, even before we get into the how, or we kind of know already how. We'll discuss. We know how do we know already how? We'll say there seems to be a case where money is not operating as money, right? When is money operating as money? When does money operate as money? When there's a counting associated with money. In other words, money operates as money when it's clear how much money you're giving and how much money the object costs. When money is kind of being handed over just as a pile, it seems to be operating much more as merchandise than it is as money. There is more than money. So therefore, what appears to be happening over here is because I'm holding out a handful of money and Reuven's saying, sure, that'll work. So really, I'm offering merchandise. This is a chalipin. The money's becoming merchandise, and therefore, again, what's happening over here is, the way it works in chalipin is, once two items are being exchanged, once you go ahead and take possession of one item, the other party automatically goes ahead and acquires his. Top of Mem Zayin, 47. They will say not only that, v'yeshlo alav onah. There is also onah in this case. They will say onah. What's onah? Well, again, we're going to get into onah as well. But ona is the halacha that you cannot overcharge or undercharge by a sixth or more. It's really more than a sixth. There's a machlokes as to exactly what the status of a sixth is a sixth. Now, so what happens if you overcharge, you undercharge by more than a sixth? What's the halacha? The transaction is void. It's void. And by the way, it's automatically voided. Now, there's a shaila of exactly what happens if it's exactly a sixth. Now, what's unique about this statement? Look at Rashi. V'yeshlo v'chaver alav dinona emein b'maos k'dei d'mei hachefetz shepech susis. So now watch this. So on one hand, the transaction works. Right? So the handing over of the money allows me to acquire the sheep. Right? So as soon as I give over the money to Ruvain, so Ruvain obviously acquires the money, I acquire the sheep, and there is no reversing this transaction. Yet, the transaction itself is subject to ona. So watch this. So the Gemara says, Kana afagav de lo mashach. So I'll say, so ultimately, again, as soon as I hand over the money to Ruvain, I acquire the sheep. Now what's the chiddush in that? I didn't do Mashiach. Even though I didn't do Mashiach, I still acquired the sheep. The chayvan de lo kapid kona dechi chalipin dami. Because I will say, since Ruvain is not bothering to count the money, he's not accepting the money as money. Rather, he's accepting the money as an object. And therefore, again, as soon as Ruvain accepts the money, I acquire the sheep through chalipin. Okay. Now listen, interestingly enough, v'yesh lo alav ona. Now at the same time, it is subject to ona. Dimachar li be'elu ka'amarle. Because we'll say now. Here's what's interesting. Ona doesn't apply. Ona doesn't apply to chalipin. I'm sorry. That didn't make sense. Yeah, no, correct. Ona doesn't apply to chalipin. Ona is a din by a sale, not a din by an exchange. Because I will say, remember again, by chalipin works even by two items that don't have matched values, right? We do chalipin like this all of the time. So again, interestingly enough, on one hand, you're saying the transaction works. Now, in order for this transaction to work, the money can't be operating as money. The money has to be operating as merchandise. So therefore, halacha l'maisa on one hand, it's a chalipin. On the other hand, you're telling me that it is subject to ona, which means that what? It's a sale. So also, so this transaction has elements of chalipin and elements of a sale. It's so incredible. So the Gemara says, so v'yesh lo alav ona dimechar li kebe'elu ka'amarle. Good. So also, because remember again, I just want to point out, the lashon of the transaction is, I take my handful of money, and what do I say to Ruvain? Sell me your sheep with these. So I'm using the lashon of mechira. Yet, again, the transaction, ultimately, again, is a chalipin. So really very interesting. So I'll say, so what's unique about this? What seems to be unique about this case is that transactionally, you could create a hybrid model which essentially draws off the benefits of both types of transactions. So on one hand, you could say, sell to me with these, holding out the pile of money, and assuming that Ruvain does not count the money, we've got a chalipin, which is great, because now by the tendering of the money, I go ahead and acquire it. Right, as soon as Ruvain takes possession of the money, I acquire the sheep, no backsies. Right, we're done. On the other hand, because I use the lashon of mechira, there is price protection. So therefore, if it turns out more than a sixth, less than a sixth, the transaction is void. Interesting. Okay. Rabbi Abba Amravuna, Machar li be'elu, Kana ve'in alav ona. So I would say, Rabbi Abba said name Ravuna, no. This case works. You're right. And if I walk over to Ruvain with a handful of money, and I say, Ruvain, halacha l'maisa, acquire, I want to acquire your sheep with these, and Ruvain doesn't count the money. As soon as Ruvain takes the money, I acquire the sheep, chalipin. However, there is no no. All right, so let's analyze this. So the Gemara says, Pshita, damim ve'in makbir aleim ha'kaminon dekani kechalipin. The kechalipin damu. So now watch this. So now again, Rav Huna's what's Rav Abba's logic, right? Why ultimately again would Rav Abba say that halacha? Rav Abba in the name of Rav Huna say that there is no ona in this case. So we'll say his logic will be simple: either you are chalipin or you're not chalipin. If you're chalipin, then there's no ona. Ona is a din in mechira. If you are not chalipin, then it's an achira. Then the Metzia again, there is onra. But the problem is that what? The transaction doesn't work. So the fact that the transaction works, therefore by definition, you have to give up on the possibility of onra. Okay, fine. So once I say that's done. That's done. Now watch this next piece. So pshita, domim ve'in makbid alein, hakarin dekechalipin damo. So we'll say, so what's at the foundation of this case over here? What's at the foundation of this case is you could relegate money to the status of merchandise. How do you do that? At least we think you could do that. Whether or not you can actually do that, we'll see. Right? But you could relegate money to the status of merchandise. How do you do that? By not being makbid on the value of the money. Right? So I walk over to Ruvain with a handful of money. I say to Ruvain, you know what? Do me a favor. Sell me your sheep with these. And Ruvain, I'm not identifying an amount. Ruvain's not identifying amount. In that case, what's clear? No one really cares about the value of the money. So when you have money that no one cares about the value of, then halach l'maisa, that could work as merchandise for chalipin purposes. That's called damim ve'in makpid aleihem. There's money, but no one's particular about the value. I take a quick look at Rashi for just a moment. So Pshita lan damim ve'im makbid alein. Rashi says nasan lo maos o chayfetz b'shvil chayfetz acher b'toras damim v'lo nikbid aleihen liros im yeshnan k'dei shavyan. So this is a case where money is being tendered, but no one's really looking as to what the value of the money is. Everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa tekani dekechalipin damu tekani chalipin damu. It works because again it's chalipin. It's like chalipin. Watch this. Chalipin umakbid aleihan mai. All right, so let's say, so this is an interesting case. Let's say we have a more classic case of chalipin, where again, I'm giving one object for another. Right, so let's say again, I have a sheep, right? I have a sheep, Reuven has a cow, I want to give him my sheep for my cow, right? So in a classic case, Reuven would take my sheep and I would acquire his cow. Let's say again, Abosai, before I give him over the sheep, I get a little bit particular about the values of everything. Take a look at Rashi. Chalipin umakbid alehen, nosan lo chayfetz b'chayfetz taras chalipin, liknos kedin kinyan, shekonin besudar, v'zeh makbid liros shehea sudar shava al kach. So we'll say, so now let's say I'm exchanging an item. Right? So now let's say I'm giving Reuven, or for that matter again, let's keep it easy. I'm giving Reuven gold. But not gold, not gold coins, not dinarim. I'm giving him a block of gold, a bar of gold, right? Why? Because I want to acquire his ox. So I'll say, so now, but before I go ahead and I start giving it over, I start thinking about, well, you know, the gold is worth $1,000. Is the ox worth $1,000? I get very caught up in the value of things. So the Gemara says, what's the status of that transaction? Is that chalipin? Or is that money? Look at Rashi, Mai. So the Gemara says, Mi kanu tarvayu b'mashicha, dechad minayu, o dilma hoil vehikbid alehen, harihin kidamim, v'havidei maos, ve'in konos achim shochem hashini. I want to say, here's an interesting shaila. See, we just got finished talking about the idea that if you have money, and you don't really care about the value of the money, right? So the money could become merchandise, affect Mashiach. What happens if you're engaged in what would look like a typical chalipin case, right? So therefore, again, I'm using merchandise for merchandise, but I'm hyper-focused on the value of the merchandise. Does that change the object into money? If it changes the object into money, then what Rabbi say? Then if it's money, if it's mos, doing Mashiach on one of the items doesn't automatically acquire the other one for the second party. You hear the Shaila? It's such a fascinating idea. To which the Gemara says, Amarav Adavar Ava. So Tashma, let's analyze. Harishahaya Tofes Paraso. If I had my cow, Va'omed, Ubachavera Va'amarlo, Parascha Lima. Or I should say, Va'amarlo, Parascha Lama, L'chamar Nitzarach. So what happens? I'm standing in the marketplace with my cow. Reuven comes over to me. He says, why do you have a cow? L'chamor ani tzarech. Right? I need a donkey, not a cow. Yesh li chamor. So I say, no problem, Reuven. You're in luck. I have a donkey. Sha'ani no sein l'cha. Right? I'm happy to go ahead and exchange my donkey. right, for you, for something of yours, right? Parascha bekama kach. Sorry, so I said, Ruven, how much is your cow? Parascha bekama bekach v'kach. Chamorcha bekama bekach v'kach. Mashach bal hachamor es hapara. V'lo hispik bal hapara limshoch es hachamor ad shemes hachamor. Lo kana bal hachamor es hapara. So the Gemara says, Shmamina, Chalipin umakpid alein lokana. So I say, now watch this. Okay, so let's put this case together again. I'm standing in the marketplace. Now both say, the introduction to this case doesn't really seem to be all that necessary. It's just interesting. Okay, I'm standing in the marketplace with my cow. Reuven comes over to me, he's like, why are you standing here with the cow? Right, this is a very Jewish case, right? Why are you standing here with the cow? Right, I need a donkey. I say, okay, just asking for a donkey. Right, I have a donkey as well. So then we'll say, what happens over here? We start getting into values, right? I have a chamar, right? I ask Ruven, so you want my donkey? I'll take your cow. So tell me again, how much is your cow? How much is your donkey? So I'll say, so we agree. Mashach bala chamar asapara. So what happens? Now what happens? I go ahead and I do mashicha on Ruven's cow. And after I did Mashiach on Ruven's cow, by the time I did Mashiach on Ruven's cow, what happened? So again, Ruven didn't get a chance to do Mashiach on my chamor before the chamor died. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Lo kana bala chamor asapara. So turns out that I did not acquire Ruven's cow. I will say, so even though I did Mashiach on Ruven's cow, I didn't acquire it. Why not? Shmamina chalipin umakpid alein lo kana. What do you see from here, I will say? What do you see from here? That when you make a chalipin case, right, into values, right, so we're no longer exchanging objects, but rather, again, we're hyper-focused on the value of the respective objects, then what, Rabbi say? Then what? Then Allah Lamaisa, it's no longer chalipin, and that becomes money. That becomes mos. Rabbi say, so remember again, wherein lies the distinction between a money case and a chalipin case? So we know, in a chalipin case, as soon as one party does mashicha on one object, the other party automatically acquires the other object wherever it is. In a money case, once I give money, that's very nice, but I don't acquire the object with money. I only acquire the object when I do Mashiach. So I'll say it appears to be from this case over here that because Reuven and I got so into talking about values, that's what? That Allah said this is not Mashiach, or it's not Chalipin, I should say, and it's money. So what do you see from here? From here you see that the same way that you could take money and turn it into merchandise, right? And affect chalipin. How? By not talking about the value of money. So Tzabosa, you could take a case of where two people are swapping items, turn that into money. How? By being hyper-focused on the values. Incredible. So Gemara says, no. Amarava, atu chalipin bishoftani askinan. They will say, let's be clear. Do you think we're talking about chalipin with fools? Or they will say, Chalipin is always about values. They will say all transactions are about values. In other words, the Gemara is trying to make this look like that when you're dealing with money, it's all about the value of the item being purchased, right? And when you talk about Chalipin, no one cares about the values of the items being exchanged. The Gemara says that's unequivocally false. Everything is about value. Everything is about value. Listen to this. Listen to Lashon over here. So interesting. Amarava, atu chalipin b'shuftani askinon. We'll say ultimately again, are we talking about chalipin being performed by fools, the lo kapti, who don't care about the value of the items they're exchanging? So we'll say, of course. In other words, we'll say now the difference is chalipin may not be explicit, saying I'm exchanging an ox that's worth $1,000 for a cow that's worth $1,000. But of course, we'll say it's understood that when people are utilizing the mechanism of chalipin to effect an exchange, bepashtos, they are exchanging what? Like valued items. Now again, I want to be clear, it doesn't have to be that way. Right? It doesn't have to be that way. But to think that the concept of chalipin is divorced from values, that's foolish. So I'll say, so what's the case that we just had before of where I'm exchanging my donkey for Reuven's cow? What happened over there? To which the Gemara says, V'hacha, ma'askin da'amarlei chamor bepara vitala. I was supposed to say there's more to the story. Watch this. What I'm saying is like this. Here was the case. I say to Reuven, I'll exchange for you. I'll give you my donkey for your cow and a sheep. Right? I'll give you my donkey for your cow and the sheep to be named later, right? So in other words, so the Maisa, there's two parts of the transaction. So let's say, now watch this, and what happened? It's actually a very interesting case. So this is our agreement. We're going to do chalipin. I'm going to give you my donkey, and you're going to give me your cow and the sheep. And what did I do? Umashach es hapara va'adayin lamashach es hatala to lo havele mashicha ma'alya. Oh, so Rabbi says, now the case makes a lot more sense. So I say to Ruvain, I'll give you my donkey in exchange chalipin for your cow and the sheep. So what did I do? I do mashicha on Ruvain's cow, but I didn't do mashicha on the sheep. After I did mashicha on the cow, so what happened? My donkey died. Transaction canceled. Why, Rabbi say? Because remember again, the way chalipin works is when one party does a full mashicha. So again, for me to do mashicha on my part would require me to do mashicha on Ruvain's cow and sheep. The fact that I only did it on the cow and not the sheep means the chalipin didn't happen. Because the chalipin didn't happen, therefore again, when my donkey dies, the donkey is my loss, right? And there was no mashicha, there was no chalipin. Okay, incredible. So the Gemara says, Amar, machali be'elu, kana v'yesh lavana. So what says now? Watch this. Let's go back to what we said before. Right? How did this whole day start? So remember again, I go over to Ruvain with a handful of money. I say to Ruvain, right, sell me your cow with this money, with this, right? Ruvain doesn't count it. I'm not putting forward an amount. So what's TALMUD? The transaction works. Now let's say, at least according to the first version of the Gemara, the transaction works, but there is no. There is the din of overcharge. Now both sides. Now remember again, why is this unique? Because on one hand, you're saying if it works, what that means is the money is operating as an object, not money, and therefore it's chalipin. But yet you're saying it's no. When those no, bless you, when those no apply, no only applies to a sale, not to chalipin. So lema savar Rafuna. So we'll say Rafuna must hold matbeya naase chalipin. So we'll say. So now watch this. The Gemara now is suggesting the only way to reconcile this, the only way to really reconcile this, would be to say that we are looking at the money as money. Money is money, and Rav Huna holds that money, however, can be consigned, right? Can be consigned to the status of an object. And therefore, again, matbeya naaseh chalipin. I will say back to yesterday's daf. I will say we entered in today with two outstanding questions. Number one, can a coin be used for the vehicle of chalipin? And number two, if the answer to that is no, can a coin be acquired? Can money be acquired with chalipin? So the Gemara suggests it must be that Rav Huna, who was the one who made the statement, Rav Huna holds matbeya naaseh chalipin. Money clearly can be used as the vehicle for chalipin. That's what Rav Huna holds. To which the Gemara says, "Lo, Rav Huna savar like Rabbi Yochanan da'amar dvar to." No, so the Gemara says, "No, that's actually not true. It's actually not true. This has nothing to do with matbeya naaseh chalipin. This is actually much more yisod. This thing I will say. Watch this. Rav Huna actually feels like Rabbi Yochanan. I will say, and this is now the third time we're having this in 2 days. We're going to have it still another time today. Rav Huna holds like Rabbi Yochanan. What does Rabbi Yochanan say? Here we go. Da'amar dvar Torah ma'os konos. So we'll say this is a famous Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is the midoraisa. When you pay money, that acquires the object. I will say, which by the way is the most straightforward way at looking forward at transactional law. I go to Ruvain. I want to. Let's just keep this simple. I want to buy wheat. I'm using this case in just a moment. I want to buy wheat, metaltalin from Ruvain. So what I've done, buying $1,000 of wheat. Ruvain, here is $1,000 cash. So I'll say, Rabbi Yochanan holds midaraisa. Done. I am now the proud owner of $1,000 worth of wheat. So we'll say, but yet everything we're seeing now is telling us that doesn't work. Right? Chazal stepped in and Chazal said, Ma'os enon konos. Umipnei ma amru mashicha kona. So we'll say, yet Chazal said, no, sorry, your money doesn't acquire for you the wheat. What do you need? You need to go ahead and do mashicha. Why? So the Gemara says, Gzeira shemen yomar lo nisrafu chitecha ba'aliyah. So we'll say, once again, what are we concerned about? We're concerned like this. If by giving the money to Ruvain, I am now the owner of the wheat, but we're concerned about what says as follows. If halacha l'maisa, something happens to that wheat, Ruvain has absolutely no urgency in trying to salvage my property. Why? Because since I already own it, whatever loss occurs. So for example, let's say a fire breaks out in Ruvain's granary, right? So he has there's no vested interest for him to try to save my stuff. Not only that, if let's say again, fire breaks out in Reuven's granary, and guess what? $1,000 worth of grain is damaged. Guess what Reuven's going to tell me? Silber, I'm so sorry. So sorry for your loss. Right? But again, your grain burned. So we'll say, so what did Chazal do? Chazal went ahead and said, you know what? Ma'os inon konos. Ma'os inon konos. They will say what that does is, it makes the seller responsible to safeguard the object I am buying until the moment it gets to my hands. As I mentioned yesterday, it's buyer protection. So I will say, so now watch this. So Rav Huna holds that in reality, it's like Rabbi Yochanan. Ma'os konos. When you pay money for something, you acquire it. Chazal stepped in and said, no, you don't. In order to afford you buyer protection, they will say, now watch this. Milsa de shchicha gazu be'rabanan. Milsa de lo shchicha lo gazu be'rabanan. We'll say like any rabbinic enactment, Chazal only instituted it when? In common cases. But in uncommon cases, they didn't institute it. So we'll say, what does that have to do with us? Everything to do with us. This case, I will say, walking over to someone, right? I walk over to Reuven with a handful of money. I say, Reuven, sell me your sheep with these. And Reuven says, okay. I will say that is an uncommon case, right? How does it work with money? Generally, again, we talk about a price, right? I count it, Reuven counts it. This is an uncommon case. Because it is an uncommon case, therefore, the rabbinic prohibition or rabbinic enactment does not apply. Because the rabbinic enactment does not apply, therefore what? When I go ahead and offer up the handful of money, I will say, what's the halacha? What's the halacha? Transaction done. But not based on chalipin. Based on what? Cold hard cash. Right? And the biblical concept that ma'os konos. Because the gzeira doesn't apply to this case, because this is an uncommon case. Incredible, I will say. We spent all of this time trying to figure out how this is a chalipin case, but in fact it turns out that what? It's not a chalipin case. What is it? It's a money case. And now the world makes perfect sense. Why? Because now both say that it's not a chalipin case, but it's just a straight sale. Therefore what? It makes sense when Rav Huna said that it's subject to onah. Why is it subject to onah? Both say why? Just a straight out sale. Incredible. Amarle Marhuna Bereid Rav Nachman Rav Ashi Asun Hachi Masni Salu. So this is how you're understanding it. Ani Hacha Masni Allah. This is how we understand it. V'chein Amar Rav Huna in Matbea Nase Chalipin. So I'll say in our version, right? So again, I will say that Rav Huna is on record as saying a coin cannot go ahead and be used as the vehicle for chalipin. So the Gemara says, b'ma konan. So we'll say, so fine. So that's the end of that. So we'll say, so bottom line, that is the end of that sugya. So we'll say, we'll get to the halacha l'maisa in just a little bit. But what I just want to point out over here is, the way the Gemara ends off, we'll say, is that the case of Rav Huna that we started out with today is in fact not a chalipin case. It's just a money case. And even though according to Rav Nachman, normally we say, right, midoraisa ma'os konos, but Chazal said ma'os einon konos, that only applies to a quote-unquote normative case, but any irregular or abnormal case, that's not going to apply, and money will in fact affect the transaction. Incredible. Okay, so now, all right, fine. Let me just tell you this now. So we'll say, so how do we paskin? Let's close out these two other cases over here. How do we paskin in terms of number one? Can a coin be used? Can money be used as the vehicle for chalipin? That's number one. And number two, if money can't be used as the vehicle for chalipin, can money be acquired through chalipin? So we'll say the Rambam paskins in Hilchos Mechira, Parak Vav, Halacha Gimel. So we'll say it's a one-liner. Aval hamatbeya kishem sheim konin bo kach eno nikna bekinyan. I really wanted the Rambam to build this up like a little bit more. This is like spend 3 days building up this. All right, and the Rambam says the same way, right? That money cannot be used as the vehicle for chalipin. So too, money cannot be acquired through chalipin. That's it. That's it. Money, right? Money cannot be used as the object to affect chalipin, nor can money be acquired through the kinyan of chalipin. That's it. So we'll say, just close that out. Beautiful. Now, we'll say, now we get to a great sugya. But makonin. So we'll say, so now that we've established that money cannot be used, a coin, for example, or money cannot be used as the vehicle for chalipin. So we'll say, so now what can be used as the vehicle for chalipin? Bama konin on both sides means, look at Rashi. It's almost actually right across in Rashi. Bama konin, kinyan chalipin, dichsib bikras shalaf ish nalo, mi shalaf anasa. So we'll say, so ma konin. Ultimately, so we'll say, actually, what the Gemara is really asking over here is, not as much what type of utensil can be used for chalipin, but rather what the Gemara is asking is, whose utensil is used for chalipin. So this is actually quite fascinating. So Rav Amar Bekelav Shalkona. So we'll say, so now, just watch this for just a second. So let's just set this up over here. I'm going over to Ruvain, right? And so we'll say, so now, what we haven't established, by the way, is, now that I know that I can't use a coin for chalipin, what I do have to answer is, what type of object can be used for chalipin? Now we'll say, I just want to frame this for you for just a second. What we're going to see over here is as follows. In kinyan chalipin, there are two ways to affect a transaction like this. There could be an exchange of like items. So for example, I have an ox, right? And Reuven has a donkey. And I want to exchange my ox for Reuven's donkey. So we could do a kinyan chalipin like that. There's also a kinyan chalipin where we could affect an exchange, and I could use one item to affect the exchange for the other item, but they are not of similar value or similar identity at all. So I'll say that's going to be the classic case. So I give Reuven an object, Reuven acquires the object, and I acquire Reuven's ox. So we'll say, so now what we're going to see is as follows, and that's also called a kinyan chalipin, also called a kinyan sudar, which we'll come to in just a moment over here. So we'll say, so now, again, we'll see all of this. So now, the Gemara is asking as follows. So actually, let me illustrate that for just a second. So for example, I used this yesterday, right? Mechiras chametz. So you come to sell your chametz, you want to give me your chametz. So we'll say, so now, I give you my pen, you lift up my pen. Now obviously, we're not exchanging like items, right? But yet you're taking something of mine, you're lifting it up, and essentially by acquiring it, by doing so, you're giving me over your chametz. So I'll say, so now that's actually it's called the kinyan chalipin, also called the kinyan sudar. Sudar means a cloak. In other words, so what we're doing over here is we're not exchanging like items, right? We're exchanging items, but lamaisa again, they are very dissimilar items. Right? I'm giving you a pen that might be worth $10, and you're giving me chametz that could be worth $5,000, depending on. Just as an aside, mechiras chametz always gives you an incredible window into people's lives, right? So when you have that guy who shows up with $5,000 of liquor and $50 of groceries, right? We probably should set up an appointment after Yom Tov, right? But l'maisa, the Bava says now the shaila is whose utensil is used, whose object is used to affect chalipin. So b'ma konin. Rav Amar Bekelav Shalkona. So we'll say, so Rav says it is with the utensil of the acquirer, Bekelav Shalkona. So the Necha Leilakona, the Lehavi Makne Kona, Ki Hechi Deligmar Velikne Le. So we'll say, so for example, so therefore Rav will say, it is the person who wants to acquire, essentially like the larger object, is the one who gives over the kli to the one who's conveying ownership, because this way, again, the kona. So let me just give you an example of this. I want to go ahead and acquire Reuven's cow, but again, I'm not exchanging an ox. I'm just acquiring the cow. So I'm going to go ahead. So we'll say. So for example, I'm going to give him my pen, right? Reuven's going to lift up my pen. I'm going to acquire his pen. I just want to point out, by the way, what chalipin could do is sometimes. Let me just throw this in here. What chalipin could do is as follows. See We're thinking about chalipin as like a final kinyan that affects ownership, and there's nothing more to do. There's another way to utilize chalipin. Let me show you. Let's say, for example, I want to acquire Reuven's cow, and I want to acquire it now. Right? So I give him my pen. Reuven lifts up my pen. I acquire his cow. And I will say, I might still have to pay Reuven for the cow. In other words, my pen is not going to be enough. Obviously, I'm going to pay him $1,000. But the idea is, I want to acquire ownership of the cow now. So by utilizing a kinyan chalipin, I could acquire the cow now, understanding that payment is due later on. So therefore the Gemara is asking, whose kli is used to affect chalipin? So Rav says it is the kona. the one who is acquiring the object, he gives the kli, because it makes sense. Because this way, I'm going to acquire something from Ruvain, so I want Ruvain to acquire something from me, so I give him my object. That's Rav. Levi Amar Bekelev Shal Makneh. Levi says, no, it's actually the one who's conveying ownership of the larger item. So, for example, I want to acquire Ruvain's cow. So Rav says, okay, Silber, you give Ruvain an object, let Ruvain acquire your object, and that way you'll acquire Ruvain's. Levi says, no, it's actually Ruvain who gives me an object, I acquire Ruvain's object, and by acquiring Ruvain's object, I also acquire his cow. Okay? We'll see the reason for that. Gemara says, come on. We'll see the logic for that later on. So we'll say, you saw this thick machlokes. You saw this fundamental machlokes. Whose kli is used to affect chalipin? Is it the kona? Is it me, the one who is acquiring from Ruvain? Or is it Ruvain, the one who is conveying ownership over to me? Incredible. So let's go. Amar Rafuna, made this guy to the Rava, or the Levi, the Amar Bekelev Shal Makneh, Haka Kani Ara Agov Glima. Shabbos, according to Levi, who says that it is the Kalev Shal Makneh. So in other words, it's Ruvain's. Ruvain, right? Ruvain gives me a kli. So it says, and it turns out that what? I could be acquiring land through a cloak. Oh, so also remember again, Chalipin can technically be used for karka as well. So we'll say if that's the case, then in essence, imagine the following scenario. Let's say I'm acquiring karka, I'm acquiring land from Ruvain. So we'll say, so for example, what that would mean is, now Ruvain's, so let's, according to Levi, who says that Chalipin is accomplished through the utensil of the makna, the one who's conveying ownership. I'm purchasing land from Ruvain and I want to acquire it now. So Ruvain gives me his handkerchief. I lift up his handkerchief, and with his handkerchief, I acquire his land. So we'll say, so that means now that what? Real property is being acquired on the back of or through movable property. The problem is we don't have that principle. Imkain, havelei nechasim sheish lanachrayis, niknim im nechasim she'in lanachrayis, va'anan ipchatran. Rabbi said we learned only the opposite is true. That nechasim she'in lanachrayis, niknim im nechasim sheish lanachrayis. Now, we'll say we know that's not the case. We hold that movable property can be acquired by dint of or on the back of movable property. Sorry, that movable property can be acquired on the back of or by dint of real property. But the reverse is not true. So how could it be that according to Levi, potentially, I could acquire Ruvain's land by lifting up his handkerchief? If Levi was here, he would literally again shoot beams of light, beams of fire at you. In other words, he would be displeased. He would be mildly displeased, right? In other words, we'll say that's actually pulsa dinura. Rashi points out is lashon of chayrim. He would excommunicate you. Me savis glima maknile. So I'll say, do you think that according to Levi, it's the handkerchief that actually conveys ownership? And I will say in Levi's logic. So let's go, right? According to Levi says that it is the one conveying ownership. It is the makneh who gives over the object. So says, just to play this out, I want to acquire something from Ruvain. So according to Levi, what happens over here is Ruvain gives me his handkerchief. I lift up his handkerchief and I acquire the object. How does that work? To which the Gemara says, I'll tell you how it works. Bahi hano to kamakabel mine gamar va'akmine. So we'll say, now watch this. Really what happens is like this. Ruvain is honored that I am acquiring something from him. So with the hana, so therefore when Ruvain gives me over his handkerchief and I acquire it, my willingness to acquire something from Ruvain generates a sense of goodwill. Because it generates a sense of goodwill, that goodwill is what causes Ruvain to give over ownership of the object to me. So Rabbi say, the handkerchief that he's giving, that's just the goodwill mechanism. Now we have a relationship. Once you have a relationship, then he feels confident conveying ownership of the object to me. So both say, so what comes out over here is a fundamental machlokus as to the mechanics of chalipin. So we have Rav. Rav says chalipin is an act of exchange. And therefore, again, halacha l'maaseh, what happens? I want to acquire Ruvain's cow. So what do? I give Ruvain my handkerchief, right? Ruvain lifts up my handkerchief, and I will say, what happens? Boom, I acquire the cow. Done. Again, I may be required to pay later on, but the point is, I own the cow right now. Levi says, no, that's not how it works. I want to acquire Ruvain's cow. Ruvain gives me a handkerchief. I lift it up, and with that hana, from the fact that goodwill, that is incurred by me acquiring something of Ruvain's, now Ruvain wholeheartedly conveys ownership of the cow over to me. Incredible. Incredible. What's that? This is like Dvarma Om de Murama Sha'olam. This is Chalipin is one of the most used kinyonim that we used. Again, at least once here, Mechiras Chametz, and I will say at least, well, hopefully, at least once in your, not at least once, hopefully once in your life when you get married. Right? In other words, I will say, so Lamaisa, again, we're going to see this. This is how we do Ksuva. So watch this. Ketanai. The Gemara says the truth is, the mechanics of Chalipin is a machlokes Tanai. We'll say first wide line. V'zos lifnim b'Yisrael, ala gu'ula v'ala t'mura, l'kayim kol davar, shalaf ish na'alo, v'nasan l're'ehu. Okay, so we'll say, now watch this. The Makar, Rabbi Richter mentioned this on Shabbos. The Makar, the source for Kinyan Chalipin, ultimately again is Megillas Rus. What happens in Megillas Rus? Right? So Rus comes to Boaz, and again that's the whole amazing episode in the Megillah where she lays down by his feet at night. So what happens? She comes to him and essentially says, "You need to redeem me." And I say, now the way it worked was, now what does it mean to redeem her? So remember again, there was no Yibum because he's not he's not a brother of her deceased husband, but there was a concept of Geula. What Geula said was, if you redeemed the property of a deceased relative, part of that was you also married his widow. So she comes over to Boaz, she says, "Redeem me." Boaz says, "Okay, but there is a closer relative than I am." So what does Boaz need to do? Boaz needs to acquire essentially the right of redemption from the closer relative, or acquire the property from the closer relative. So Boaz says, so what happens? This is what it means. V'zos lifnim b'Yisrael. This was an old statute in Klal Yisrael. Ala gu'ula v'ala t'mura. For the redemption, for the exchange. L'kayim kol davar. We'll see what all of this means. To uphold all things. Shalaf ishnalo v'nasan l're'ehu. A person would take off his shoe and give it to his friend. What is going on over here? So we'll say, watch this. Geula, zu mechira. So Geula refers to a sale. V'cheinu omer, lo yigal. Timura, what's Timura? Zu chalipin. We'll say Timura refers to the concept of chalipin. V'cheinu omer, so to it says, lo yachlifenu, v'lo yamiro. So, l'kayim kol davar shalaf ish na'alo v'nasan l're'ehu. So we'll say, so now, watch this. After the pasuk talks about chalipin, right? Chalipin, then what does it say? How is Chalipin affected? I will say, you would take off your shoe and give it to your fellow. And I will say, this is incredible. Right? Why? Right? The shoe is a kli. The shoe is a utensil. So what happens? One party would take off his shoe and give to his fellow. What's the problem? What doesn't the pasuk tell me? What doesn't the pasuk tell me? Who's giving the shoe to who? So we'll say, now watch this. Mi nasan lami, Boaz nasan lagoel. So we'll say, so bepashtus Boaz. Now we'll say, who's Boaz? Boaz is the one who wants to acquire the property. Right? So Boaz gave it to the Redeemer. So Boaz is the Kona, he's the acquirer. Boaz gives it to the Kona, right? The Kona lifts up, right? Or I should say the Makna, right? The other guy will call him. The other guy lifts up the shoe and Boaz acquires the property. Rabbi Yehuda says, no. Goel nasan LaBoaz. No, not true. The Goel. The other guy gave his shoe to Boaz. So Boaz says, here's the Machlokas. So Boaz says, the Machlokas Rav and Levi is ultimately again a Machlokas Rav Yehuda and one second. Rav Yehuda and the Rabbanon. Good. So Tana, Kolim Bikli, Afa Pishem Moshe Pruta. So we'll say, so okay, so now that's the end of that, right? So we'll say, so now fundamental Machlokas, whose utensil do we use? What we call the Kalev Shalkona, the one acquiring, or ultimately again, the Makna, the one giving over. So that's the fundamental Machlokas. Good. We'll say, hold that. The Gemara doesn't have a resolution with it. We'll get to resolution in Eretz Hashem. Next. Tana. Konim Bikli, Afal Pisha in Boshava Pruta. Okay. We'll say this is fascinating. So now we know that Chalipin could be affected, I will say, with the utensil, even though the utensil being used to affect the kinyan doesn't have a value that matches the item being acquired. So we'll say, so now to take this to the extreme, the Brisa says over here, you could utilize a kli, even if the kli is not worth a pruta. Wow. Amr Nachman, lo shana ela b'kli. That's only true if you're actually using a utensil. Aval b'piri lo. But ultimately, again, not true with produce. Now, so we're going to see Rav Nachman in general holds that a produce cannot be used to affect chalipin, only a kli. Only a kli. Rav Shesha says afilu beperos. Rav Shesha says no. You could even go ahead and affect chalipin, even with peros, even with merchandise or fruit. So the Gemara says, my time with Rav Nachman. People say, why does Rav Nachman hold that peros cannot be used as the vehicle to affect chalipin? Amar kra na'alo. Because we'll say, remember again, where is chalipin learned out from? Boaz and Rus. What did Boaz use? What was used? A shoe. I want to point out, a shoe is a kli. Why is a shoe a kli? Because again, I will say a shoe has a receptacle in it. Right? So therefore, by definition, a shoe is a kli. So na'al in midiachrini lo, you could use a na'al, or it doesn't literally mean you just have to use a shoe, but it means you could use something like a shoe, which is a kli, but nothing else. So my time to Rav Sheshes, what Rav Sheshes is logic that you could even use peros. So the Gemara says Amar Kra lekayim kol davar, because we'll say the pasuk says to uphold all things, all things. So what does all things mean? That you could even use merchandise or peros to affect chalipin. Rav Nachman nami haksiv l'kaim kol davar. Rav Nachman who says you can only use a kli, you can't use peros. What do you do with kol davar? So the Gemara says hahu l'kaim kol davar d'niknin b'minal. What that means, Rav Nachman says, it means that you could acquire anything with chalipin. That's what it means, right? But for the object actually being used to affect chalipin, has to be a kli. But once you're using a kli, you could acquire anything you want with chalipin. Rav Sheshes nami haksiv na'alo. What does Rav Sheshes do with na'alo shoe? Rav Sheshes ma na'alo davar hamasuyam af kol davar hamasuyam. Rav Sheshes says just like a na'al is something complete, right, whole, so too you can only use something whole to affect chalipin. La fuke chatzi rimon vechatzi egos delo. To exclude, I will say you cannot use a half a pomegranate or a half a nut in order to affect chalipin. Okay? I'm Rav Sheshes Beis Rav Didi. Keman kasvei. So we'll say, so again, so it's not a point, that's very, very exciting. So we'll say, so now watch this. So we have two outstanding machloksim over here. Number one, I will say, let's go out of order actually. Number one is, what can be used to affect chalipin? Right, so this is machlokis. Machlokis ultimately Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes. Rav Nachman only a kli. Rav Sheshes essentially even peros, anything. That's machlokis one. Machlokis two is whose utensil are you using to affect chalipin? Ultimately, again, Rav says the kli of the kohen, the one who's acquiring, and and Levi ultimately again the kli of the makneh, the one who's conveying. Okay, so those are the two that are open. So we'll say, so now watch this. This is very exciting. I'm going to say Kiman Kasina Illa. So we'll say today, contemporarily, in accordance with who, do we use the following lashon? The Gemara says, B'mana dekasher lemikne bay. So we'll say, by the way, if this lashon sounds familiar, this is lashon of a ksuva. Now, the truth is, the Gemara over here does not actually mean to only make this lashon of a ksuva. This was actually the lashon ultimately again of other documents and transactions. So the Gemara says, so we write b'mana dekasher lemikne bay, that this transaction is ultimately again being done b'mana with an object dekasher lemikne bay, which is fit to ultimately again for transactional use. So we'll say b'mana lafukim in Rav Sheshes the amar konin beperos. So we'll say b'mana means that we pass like Rav Nachman. That in order to go ahead and affect chalipin, you need a kli. Mana means a kli. So to exclude the position of Rav Sheshes, that you could use anything. Dekasher, that is fit. Lafuki mid Shmuel, the Amar Konin, about say Amar Beis, the Amar Konin b'meruka. Shmuel holds about say that you could even use a utensil. This is actually interesting. They used to apparently make utensils out of dried cow dung. It's a nice housewarming gift, right? So the Maisa, right? So according to Shmuel, which essentially means that you could use anything. So we'll say, so therefore again, B'mana teaches me you need a kli, not peros, like Rav Nachman. Number two, dekasher, ultimately again, it has to have some level of value to go ahead and exclude the position of Shmuel that you could use a dung kli. Lemikne, to acquire, La fuki midalevi da amar bekelav shal makna. Kamash malan lemekanya v'lo leknuyebe. Incredible. So I will say lemikne means that what? You're using it to acquire, which means whose utensil is being used? It is the acquirer's utensil and not the makna. So I will say, so to go ahead and ultimately hold that we paskin like Rav and not like Levi. So we'll say from that entire lashon, we sum up this entire sugya. Number one, like Rav Nachman, in order to affect chalipin, you need a kli. Number two, the kli has to have some basic unit of value, right? Even if it's just a pruta. And number three, it is the utensil of the acquirer. Kelev shel kona that is being used for chalipin, not kelev shel makne. Incredible. Rav Papa says, Leni'ute matbea. Rav Papa says, by the way, this lashon also comes to exclude the use of a coin. Now, we have already done that, but let me say again, that it has to be a kli and not a matbea. Ultimately, again, it comes to exclude the use of Isurei Hana. You can't use anything that is prohibited from benefit to affect chalipin. Very interesting. Ikidami, others say bay, the lashon of bay in that tak, right? The bimana, the kasha, the mikne bay with it. This comes to exclude the use of a coin. The kasher, that comes to Isurei Hana. Ava morika lo itzrich. Rabbi says you don't even have to include morika. Why don't you have to include morika? Because Rabbi say a dung utensil is so not chashav that everyone would agree that it cannot be used. Therefore, Rabbi say if we kind of sum this up, it's incredible. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, Rav Nachman, you have to use a kli for chalipin. Number two, the kli has to have at least a shavar pruta value, and number three, it is kelev shel kona. We use the utensils of the one who is acquiring, not the kelev shel makna. Incredible. I will say we have another minute or two. Let's go weiter. Asimon kones hamadbea. So says, remembering it back to the Mishnah. Asimon, which is an unminted coin, could go ahead and acquire matbea, another coin. So my asimon, what's an asimon? Amarav mos hanitanos b'simula beis hamerchatz. So Rav says this is interesting. So I will say so. An asimon is the coin that was used for entry into the bathhouse. So I will say they used to have coins, right? You would purchase bathhouse coins. Well, Rashi says, what was the point of the bathhouse coins? You would give them to the bathhouse attendant. This was like the counter. This way, the bathhouse attendant would know how many people in the bathhouse, and Rashi points out he would know how much water he used and how many towels. It's interesting what say. So apparently, again, entry into the Talmudic bathhouses gave you a towel. Yeah, a robe, slippers, a towel. Right? So Ma'aseh says, so this way, again, that's the token. So the Gemara says, is that true? Meisvei, ein mechalin Ma'aseh sheni al asimon, v'lo al ma'os hanitanos b'sula beis hamerchatz. You know, so over here, the Brisa seems to indicate, right, you can't redeem Ma'aseh sheni on an asimon or on bathhouse coins. So what do you see from here? That asimon and bathhouse coins are two separate things. Mechlal da asimon lav ma'os hanitanos b'sula beis hamerchatz. V'chitema Perushe kamefarish. Maybe the Bryce is just explaining itself. In other words, maybe it's saying asimon. And what is an asimon? It's the bathhouse coins. V'halotanaki. Right? So we didn't learn this way. After all, what does it say? Mechalin ma'aser sheni al asimon. Divrei Rabbi Dosa. Right? Rabbi Dosa says you can redeem ma'aser sheni even on an asimon. The Chum say ein mechalin. Chum say no, you can't. The shavin she'in mechalin al ma'os hanitanos b'simon beis hamerchatz. But everyone agrees that you cannot redeem Ma'aser Sheni on bathhouse coins. Ela Am Rabbi Yochanan, Maya Asimon Pulsa. What is an Asimon? Asimon is a pulsa. Rashi says, Mechaser Tzura. It is an unminted coin, a slug. An unminted coin. Rabbi say that is an Asimon. So as we saw in the Mishnah, an Asimon, Rabbi say, doesn't have the status of Kesef, rather it has the status of merchandise. V'az Rabbi Yochanan Tameh. And Rabbi Yochanan goes according to his reasoning. Am Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Dos, Rabbi Shmuel, Amru Davar Echad. Rabbi Dosa Adamran, Rabbi Dosa we just mentioned before, Rabbi Shmuel Mahi, Desanya, Bitzarta HaKesef, Biadecha, L'Rabos, Kol Davar Hanitz Dar Biyad, Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says, anything you can hold in your hand can be used for money for Ma'aser Sheni. Rabbi Akiva Omer L'Rabos Kol Davar Sheyesh Alav Tzura. Rabbi Akiva says, no, the only thing that can be used for Ma'aser Sheni redemption, Rabbi Dosa is what? Only an item that ultimately is minted. Right? But if it doesn't have a surah, if it doesn't have an edge, it can't be used for Ma'aser Sheni. We'll say, bottom line, asimon is an unminted coin. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, it can be used as for chalipin because it has the status of merchandise in that money. We'll say, absolutely incredible. Shkoyach. All right, have a great day, everyone.